Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 11th Annual Berkeley Sports Law Conference. My name is Gravir Gill, and on behalf of the entire team at the Berkeley Journal of Entertainment and Sports Law, thank you all for being here. We're incredibly grateful to see such a strong turnout of students, practitioners, and industry leaders who share an interest in one of the most dynamic areas of the law today. Sports law has always been multidisciplinary, but in the last decade especially, it's evolved into something even more complex, sitting at the intersection of business, media, technology, labor, and public policy. What makes today particularly exciting is that the sports industry is undergoing a profound transformation. The traditional boundaries between leagues, media companies, technology platforms, and investors are blurring. Teams are no longer just sports organizations, they're global entertainment brands. Media rights deals now shape the financial future of entire leagues. Private equity and institutional capital are reshaping ownership structures. And technological innovation, from streaming to sports betting to data analytics, is redefining how fans engage with sports. And at the same time, we're witnessing one of the most significant shifts in the legal and economic structure of college athletics in modern history. The introduction of name, image, and likeness, or NIL as we like to call it, has fundamentally changed the relationship between universities, athletes, and the broader sports marketplace. Student athletes now operate as entrepreneurs and brand builders in ways that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. That shift raises fascinating legal questions about labor rights, intellectual property, compliance structures, and competitive balance within college sports. And all of these developments create an enormous need for thoughtful legal analysis and strategic leadership. Exactly the kind of expertise represented by the speakers joining us today. Throughout the day, we've structured the conference to explore several key dimensions of the modern sports industry. Our first panel, The Business of Modern Sports, Capital, Ownership, and Strategic Growth, will examine how capital flows, ownership structures, and the way transactions are structured shape the future of sports organizations. Our second panel focuses on players' rights, diving deeper into NIL, trademark issues, and athlete advocacy. As the legal environment around athlete compensation continues to evolve, lawyers and advisors are playing an increasingly central role in helping athletes navigate branding, IP, and long-term career strategy. After the second panel, we will provide lunch and have a short break to re-energize. You can connect, and we'll get back into the second half of the conference. We're also incredibly honored to host our keynote speaker, Mr. Lee Steinberg, widely regarded as one of the most influential sports agents in history. Mr. Steinberg has represented some of the most prominent athletes in professional sports and has played a major role in shaping the modern sports agency landscape. Mr. Steinberg has represented the number one pick in the NFL draft a record 8 separate times, and his clients are some of the most recognizable in sports. I mean, you might remember Patrick Mahomes as a couple of Super Bowls, right? His perspective on NIL and the future of student athletes is invaluable as the industry continues to evolve. Finally, our closing panel will explore the digital sports economy, looking at how media rights, sports betting, and digital platforms are transforming the commercial landscape of sports. As streaming services, sports books, and digital platforms are transforming the commercial landscape of sports. Events like this are possible because of the generosity and engagement of our speakers, many of whom have taken time out of demanding professional schedules to share their insights with us. We're extremely grateful for their willingness to participate and contribute to this discussion. We'd like to thank the Berkeley Center for Law and Technology, our faculty advisors, and the members of the Berkeley Journal and Entertainment of Sports Law who worked hard behind the scenes to organize today's conference. Another shout out goes to my co-conference editor, Zach Price, who's worked with me all year to get this day to you guys, and he's happy to let me do all the talking. I also want to give a special thanks to my co-editor-in-chief, Maria Harris, our anchor in organizing this conference, and without whom this event wouldn't have even gotten off the ground. Most importantly, thank you to all of you for joining us. Conferences like this work best when they're interactive, so we encourage you to engage with our speakers, ask questions, and continue the conversation both throughout the day and beyond. With that, let's get started. It's now my pleasure to introduce the first panel, The Business of Modern Sports, Capital Ownership and Strategic Growth. Zach, if you want to moderate.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll be the moderator for this panel, and we'll go through questions, and then at the end, the sort of last 10 minutes of the panel, we'll open it up to audiences for Q&A. So if you have questions as they're speaking, write it down, and you'll have an opportunity to ask that. So I want to introduce our two panelists. The first is Richard Brand. He is the co-head of Arndt Fox Schiff's firm-wide sports practice group, as well as the San Francisco managing partner. Rich counsels many professional sports leagues, such as the NFL, NBA, Live Golf, Major League Pickleball, and professional sports teams across the NFL, NBA, MLB, MLS, and NWSL, so a lot. In addition to Rich's representation of leagues, teams, and venues, he regularly counsels sponsors and brands. He's received two-time recognition as Sports Business Journal Power Player, and this year, Rich was named one of the Daily Journal's top 100 lawyers in California for a fourth year in a row, and the fifth time overall. Best Lawyers also recognize Rich as Lawyer of the Year for his high-profile sports work. And our second panelist, Jenny Simon O'Neill, is the co-director of athletics at Cal. She brings over 16 years of dedicated service and leadership to Cal Athletics, previously serving as Deputy Athletic Director, Chief of Staff, and Senior Women Administrator. In her role, she has played a key leadership role on the department's executive team and the director's cabinet, helping to guide strategic decisions and manage day-to-day operations for one of the nation's largest athletic programs, with, ready for this, 30 varsity sports, over 900 student athletes, and more than 300 staff members. She served as a sports administrator for men's basketball, women's soccer, and men's and women's rowing, and has directed over 17 of Cal's 30 sports during her tenure. And she has helped lead to 5 national team championships and numerous individual titles. So we have a great panel up here, and so I'm going to start with some general questions and then have a few questions for each of the panelists individually. And then again, at the end, the last 10 minutes, we'll open up to questions. So this is a general question, and it's going to be very broad, so I'm excited to see where you take this. But over the past decade, how has the structure of professional and collegiate sports evolved in their own right and then as compared to each other?
You want to start?
You want to start? Go ahead.
First of all, I'm really grateful to be here. This is one of the things that makes me really proud to be on this campus. I've been here for 18 years in a number of different roles, also grew up on this campus, and to be at a place where we're hosting these types of conferences and having these types of discussions is just a powerful experience. So, I think in terms of how college athletics has evolved, and I'll let Richard here talk about professional sports, but it's definitely been arguably one of the most tumultuous times in college athletics over the last several years. And certainly in the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of evolution in terms of deregulation of the NCAA and just, really student-athlete-centered decisions around, say, unlimited meals or the Alston case, which we can get into at some other point. But I think most significantly, there's no question that the House settlement that was officially passed on June 6, 2026, then took effect on July 1st, 2026, is the most the biggest change that we have seen. And as many of you may know, the House settlement most notably allowed revenue sharing with student athletes. So the institution kind of overnight was able to provide $20.5 million annually to student athletes in their program. Prior to that, student athletes were able to earn money off of their name, image, and likeness. You saw a lot of collectives across the country that were supporting student athletes, mostly through their donor base, and now that has moved for the most part in-house, though there's still opportunities to earn money above the cap. The other thing the House settlement did, which I think a number of we don't talk about as much, is it did create roster limits. So across all of our sports, we now have roster limits, and student athletes are able to receive scholarships up to those roster limits. So for programs that actually added all of those scholarships, that's another, say, $9 million expense, if not more, that institutions could add. We're not required to add, but could add. And to be clear, all of this is permissible. So the $20.5 million revenue share number. Nobody has to do that, but for us at our level, it's critically important that we're engaging in that space in order to be competitive. So, I'm curious to hear what Richard would say about kind of the evolution of professional sports and how they're starting to converge. So if you want to go, and then I'm happy to hop back in.
Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me. People can hear me without this anyway. A couple of things. First of all, thank you for having me. I never went to Berkeley, but I'm a bear, okay? And I've been a bear for a long time. I've been teaching here for 14, 15 years. My daughter was a bear. She went to graduate school in Stanford and wore Cal shirts to class every single day. Had no friends, but it was okay. She gets that. So happy to be here. Delighted to be on a panel with someone who showed really good judgment and didn't go to law school. Sorry, guys.
But I kind of wish I did.
Yeah. No, you don't. But we'll talk afterwards. So I would say I am the most prominent lawyer on this panel. I think that's pretty fair to say. But one other thing, if I can this is what I do, so I'm sorry, change the rules a little bit. If anybody has questions throughout, just to keep this more interactive, I'd love that. Just raise your hand, say why I'm wrong and she's right, which is going to be the likely result. But feel free to make this interactive. It makes it the less you hear from me, the better the panel's going to be. So please help me talk less. But to the question. The biggest issue, I would say, and it's a technical legal term, so for those who aren't in law school, forgive me, money. Money, that's the change, okay? And there's a lot more of it, okay? And there's a lot more of it at both levels. Who would have ever believed, Jenny, that someone takes a cut and pay when they go pro? That can't happen, but it can happen, right? Just ask some very famous WNBA players whether or not it was worth it. So money has changed everything. And at the professional level, and I do focus on the college level and the professional level, but in different ways. I represent a couple of universities, and so I'm sort of on the side that you're on, talking to the athletic director and having him say, I can't compete. I can't get anyone, and even if I get anyone, I can only get them for like a semester, and then they just leave, or they say, I'm going to the portal. I never even knew what going to the portal meant before, but it's money. Money has changed things. Start with the professional, because I do tend to do a little more of that. What's changed? 2 words, another non-legal term, private equity, and other sources of funding. There's money out there that never used to be out there, and that has changed the whole nature. I just finished a deal a couple of months ago. One of my clients, they have like purple jerseys, and they're in Los Angeles. They sold their team for what is a reported $10 billion, okay? Okay, that's ridiculous. We were sitting there on the closing, and someone said, the wire came in, and I'm thinking, I don't even know what a wire that big looks like. I mean, can you just do a wire for $10 billion, whatever? But I would say, but that wouldn't have happened without the world of private equity, without additional sources. And then when you get private equity involved, it changes everything, because private equity, you can't really blame them. They kind of want to make money. They want to get a return, so it's no longer that purity. I want to own a team. I want to be great. I don't care, how much money I have to spend. So that's changed the nature of professional sports, and it's changed the nature of college sports. And now for schools like Cal, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, because, you have, what was it, the 2 women from Miami who said that if they don't get X dollars in NIL, they're going to go into the portal. So that has been the biggest change in the structure. And NIL, to me, is probably more interesting than the other stuff I talk about, because, Jenny, I taught a course here for 2 semesters on NIL. Mm-hmm. We discontinued it because the NIL that we started teaching didn't exist anymore. Remember we had all those rules? Mm-hmm. And I felt like, sending an email to each student, never mind what I said. Never mind what I said. Remember, you cannot use NIL to encourage someone to come to a team. Well, never mind that. You can't do that. So I think the entire world has sort of been flipped on the other side. And the good news is that people do get money. The bad news is I think a lot of people who probably need it the most are still not getting the money. Mm-hmm. But in any event, I think that has been one of the biggest changes. And again, when I talk about private equity being an issue, it's not just private equity, it's sources of capital. And, and there's a lot of concerns about that. So why do you think leagues permit some of this craziness to happen? It comes back to the first thing I said, money. The only way you're going to get a team to sell for $10 billion is if you allow additional sources. It was kind of crazy because one of the things we were talking about when we did the deal for a $10 billion deal, if you're worth $20 billion, you can't buy that team. You can't take 50% of your net worth and plug it in. How could you be in a world where $10 billion, where $20 billion net worth, you need to start finding private equity, you need to find other investors and stuff like that. So to me, that's been the biggest change in the structure. The other thing that I would say has been a big change in the structure, both at the college level and at the professional level, is the breaking apart of common things that you used to stream, media, for instance. Media's 20 different pieces now. You get this, you have all different companies doing it. Two-thirds of you, this is how you watch a game, okay? Me, I sit there, I turn off the phone and I watch the game. You guys tell me what happened before I even know what happens, and you consume it differently, and you can get it differently, and that's changed, and that's at the college level also. And the other thing, and then I'm going to stop talking for a second, the other thing about that changes so much at the college level, which I find so interesting, is much like the pro level, the focus starts becoming on players rather than teams. And I kind of blame all of us, you, me, everyone, because I grew up on the East Coast. I was a Big East fan. I went to Georgetown. Patrick Ewing was in my wife's philosophy class. I think he got a very good grade, so I guess he must be really smart. But he was in that class, and that was the team that I thought about, and they were in the Big East, and the Big East played St. John's, and they had all their rivalries. And now Syracuse isn't in the same thing. So I think what we've done in some ways is we've broken apart all those allegiances, both in the professional world and the sports world. In the professional world, you watch a game, and I sit there with my son and some of his friends, and they say, "Oh, he needs to get. I need him to get 12 more points, and I need them to do that." And I'll say, "Well, what about the game?" I don't care. I just need him to get that because I'm 10 points below 10. So I think we consume sports differently. And I think that's been the other big change. I'm going to do something you won't see a lot of right now. I'm going to take a breath and let Jenny finish up the point.
Do you want to move to the evolution of the media question too?
Yeah, I think so. One of the questions that a lot of students had was talking about media. So with the shift from traditional broadcast deals to streaming and direct-to-consumer models, how should teams, both professional and college, think about long-term media strategies? And this is perfectly going to kind of dovetail on what we just talked about.
Yep. First, I want to zoom out for a second, and the dollars from television are probably one of the most critical revenue sources for us in a college athletics department. As you may have heard, over the last couple of years, the Pac-12 fell apart, and we have moved to the ACC. When we moved to the ACC, again, for many reasons, we're very happy to be in the ACC. It is across the country, which is a little bit of a challenge, but there's a lot of great institutions that we really enjoy competing against. When we moved to the ACC, we took a 1/3 distribution, which meant that critical revenue source became much, much more limited for us, which comes back to Richard's point that, what keeps my co-athletic director up and I up at night, and I'm sure the chancellor as well, is how to fund the enterprise. So a really important part of our work. But I do want to talk about just the evolution of media and kind of at a macro level. I think as Richard said, we're all watching, many of us are watching content on our phones, right? I personally have never had a normal cable package. I just have never done it. And my guess is that there's a lot of other people that haven't done it as well. So if you think about how we want people to be able to access content from a macro level, I'm really happy that ESPN and some of these larger networks have made the adjustment to really meet people where they are so that you can now get the, direct to consumer, like you can get the a la carte ESPN app and get all of the ACC channels that we want, or ACC and ESPN channels that we want. From a more local level, I think it's important to think about our media strategy, and we basically have a television person in house now because we produce all of our own content for the ACC network, and we hired him from ESPN, and it's been really interesting kind of to learn from him. And one of the things we talked about is that we have 19 events this year on linear broadcast. 19 out of some 300 events that we do. So if we only went the linear route, people wouldn't really know we existed, right? 19 events. But we also have another 160 digital events that we produce. The neat thing about that is that we actually are able to tell our own story. We produce it. We decide who's telling our story, who the voice is on there. So we're able to expand our brand globally, which we wouldn't just through linear. We're also able to kind of create a year-round engagement, right? People can watch things whenever they want to. They can watch it in their car. They can do whatever they want to be able to do. And it also is kind of creating a long-term kind of foolproof strategy for us for years to come, because I would be shocked if the next round of media deals are solely linear. I think that there's going to be a much more diversified set of deals going forward. So it's really interesting to see kind of the direction this is going. But I think there's also a ton of opportunity in this for our student athletes to be able to tell their stories, which ultimately, to Richard's point, is connected to NIL. That's how they are able to really capitalize on the platform that the ACC offers across the nation. And when we're able to do some of that storytelling ourselves, it really enhances their brand as well.
Are you sure you didn't go to law school?
I spent a lot of time with lawyers. I have an MBA, so.
That was pretty good. So, a couple of things. First of all, I agree with everything you said, but I think when you look at the media holistically, when you look at where we are in the media world, we're in a very terrible place if you happen to be either part of that broadcast company or if you happen to be part of the teams that thought that they were going to be getting paid an enormous amount of money for another 20 years. So the first thing that we're seeing in the media world, which is kind of a little bit scary, it's almost like the real estate world after a recession. Everybody has to get to a different level and understand that I know you signed the deal, but and I will tell you, it's great for a lawyer who has a good media practice, because every single team is coming, what am I going to do? They're not going to pay me anymore. They can't pay me anymore because they made a deal that they were going to pay you this much money because you were going to have that many people watching. And the co-athletic director of Cal just said she's never had a cable package. Shame on you. What are you doing to my clients? And by the way, we've all heard cord cutters. Okay, for those who don't know, you've got the people like me. I only have one cable package, okay, and then we stream for the other two on our other TVs. But you got someone like me. Although I watch it on my phone, I do all the other stuff. I like watching it on TV. I like having those games accessible. So I'm just a cable guy, okay. But then you have the cable cutters. You've heard those are people who said I've had enough of that. I'm not worried about that. The thing that is really changing the world is what they call the instead of the cable cutters, the cable nevers. Meaning they never had it, they don't know what they're missing, they don't want it, and they don't need it, okay? And that changes the whole dynamic. So you're right, it's a very exciting time once we level off. Once, I did the Los Angeles Lakers media rights deal. It was the largest regional sports deal ever for billions and billions of dollars. There's no way that a company can afford to pay that when you don't have a cable package. And curious, how many of you have a cable package? Do you see the problem here? Okay, all of you guys are ruining everybody's life. But seriously, I saw 5 or 6 hands. Okay, if you are Fox, if you are Comcast, if you are Spectrum, how are you going to pay those enormous amounts of money you promised to pay someone when I only got 5 hands here? And I will note, nothing personal, not everyone here is 19 and a half years old, okay? Some of you are older than 19 and a half, but you didn't put up your hand either, okay? So that's where we're going to have to see a complete change in the world. And when we get there, it's going to be fine. They talk about direct-to-consumer is the next great thing. Instead of going with all these companies, you go to direct-to-consumer. Well, that's great, but it's not going to generate that kind of money. And let's go back to the first comment. When I teach my class, any of my students here will say, the word I say, the most important word is leverage. Today, the most important word is money, because all of these things are going to lead to how are the cable companies going to stay alive. And if they don't stay alive, then they're going to have to unwind their agreements, which my firm is very happy to help people do for a fee. And then what they have to do is they have to figure out, how are we going to put this together? How are we going to consume it? Is the league going to come up with something? And then in college sports, you have another terrible situation, which is you have the haves and the have-nots. So if you are the Big Ten, if you're the SEC, and if you're the ACC, you have tremendous market power to negotiate these wonderful deals. If you're the Mountain West Conference, no disrespect to the Mountain West Conference, not so easy. And so you're going to have a situation, some people say we're going to have 4 conferences in 10 years, and everyone else, and no, but I don't think it's that drastic, and I hope it doesn't happen. But so I think that's the difference between the media world now. Everybody is trying to, honestly, the answer is they're trying to figure it out. And when we meet with clients and they tell us, and they say, so what's the answer? I go, we need to work something out. And they say, okay, well, that's great. So I'm paying you X dollars an hour to say that. But the answer is every deal is different. Every problem is different. In the colleges, it's different. At Cal, you want to get as great exposure as you can. But, in the end, a lot of it's going to have to do with recruiting and with winning and all that other stuff. So it's great to be able to stream those games and to see it on your phone. But for some of the major collegiate sports, it's going to be a challenge. So to me, I don't know what the answer is, but I think we're going to be going through a real shakeout, and it's going to be 10 years from now when I'm sitting at this conference, it's going to be a very, very, well, first of all, I'll probably be sloughed down at this conference, but it's going to be a very, very different world we live in for college and sports. And again, as you said, as the money starts coming into college, it's a very different dynamic, and so we'll see.
I'll turn it back to you in a second, but just one note on the 3 conferences or the 4 conferences that have incredible,
including the ACC,
including the ACC, bargaining power in the market. So even within that group of 4, I mean, the Big Ten is bringing in $65 million a year per institution, and the ACC at a full share is at about 33. We're at a third of that. But you think about kind of even that differential, what the SEC and the Big Ten are bringing in versus what the ACC and the Big 12 are bringing in is quite different. And then you look to the Mountain West and some of these smaller conferences, and it's a whole different story. So there is some stratification, if you will.
And by the way, your costs aren't that much different. You still have to produce the games. You still have to have a stadium or an arena. You still have to, and you have to do the NIL thing. So you're getting less money. And I realize Cal can depend on the fact that the state of California will just pay you anything you ever need, right? It's just, they'll just keep writing checks. But for some of the other less lucky places, it becomes very, very difficult because you have to do more with less. If you're Michigan, you get to do more with more. But for you, it's more with less, and that's the challenge. And but it's going to find a comfortable place one day.
Let me know when the state starts writing that check.
Yeah. Oh, was I wrong?
I wanted to follow up with something you were saying, Jenny, and maybe get some some concrete details here to work with in terms of what's the correct kind of financial strategy in the future. And one thing is Cal Athletics is a huge contributor to the U.S. Olympic team. It is. And revenue sports have really dominated the financial planning. So how can institutions like Cal work to sustain the non-revenue sports in this sort of increasingly commercial environment that you're both describing?
Yeah, in my mind, it's a bit of a both and. I mean, we really do. Oh, sorry. Apparently I turned that off. For our long-term financial strategy, football and basketball have to be the center. Actually, for probably the short term and the long term. It is incredibly important from a revenue standpoint and from a brand standpoint that we have perennial success in those sports. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. From an Olympic sports standpoint, we have an incredible history, to your point, about putting people on Olympic teams, Olympic medals. In the last Olympics in Paris, we earned 23 medals. We would have been 12th as a country. It is a huge point of pride for this university that we're able to see our students kind of on the international stage. And there's some fun. I actually got to go to the Olympics in 2012. I was the @Bears in London Twitter handle. It was pretty fun. But it's a really kind of special experience to see our student athletes in the Olympic Village coming together, from all different countries, and it's a pretty cool thing. And that is probably not going to be the long-term financial strategy for us. From a financial standpoint, we have to continue to build our brand. so that we can sell tickets, we can sell sponsorships. The philanthropy, I think, really does. We have an incredibly generous donor base. And I think that donor base wants to know that what they're investing in is successful. So year over year, we need to be winning in football. We need to be winning in basketball. And there's a really kind of exciting upward trajectory right now in all of those sports. And we can't lose sight of the success in the Olympic sports. And our investment and our time and our energy right now has to be in football and basketball.
So then a question for you, Richard, which is, from a transactional perspective, what provisions tend to be the most heavily negotiated provisions in a sports-related document? And some examples could be acquisitions, licensing, promotional, and advertising. But what's the real tension that you're seeing?
Do I have to say it again? I'll say it again. It's the money provisions. Those are the ones that create the greatest amount of discussions, whether it's, do you get a refund if there's a force majeure? Do you get is there going to be a bonus paid? Or you could have an earn out on something. It's sort of the money provisions, because that's what the businesses are most focused on. So when you talk about most heavily negotiated provisions, most of them relate to the compensation, the payments, the fee structures, and things like that. There's lots of other niceties in there that are negotiated, assignment provisions. I know everybody here would love for me to spend an hour talking about an assignment provision. But the big provisions, and you say transactions, you say purchases, whether it's an ownership agreement, for instance, when you buy a professional sports team, you usually buy into a joint venture agreement. And that's a group of owners collectively owning that interest. One owner or several owners collectively own a lot more of that interest, but you're all involved in there. So what are the provisions you worry about? You worry about decision making, okay? I'm going to buy a 1% interest in the Golden State Warriors. That's easy. This is how the negotiation goes. I've got my pen. Where and what would you like me to sign? Okay, that 1% owner isn't going to be doing anything there. The decision making is going to the people. It's a golden rule. The ones with the golds get to rule the JVs. So I think I changed the expression a little. But so it's going to be a focus on some of those provisions. Decision making, who gets the fees, who gets to make determinations about the long term. Do we want to have a new stadium? Do we want to have a new this? Do we want to have a new that? So those are the provisions that I find most typically negotiated. Other provisions that are negotiated in a document, and there's two types of documents. There's the sale agreement. That's a different relationship. I'm selling to you. I'm going to be done with it, so I'm not going to be worried about the long-term relationship. So it's really it's like when you buy a house. If you sell your house to somebody, you don't really care about the person who bought the house. You care about the money that the person who bought the house has. But when you have a longer-term relationship, like entering into JV or doing a sponsorship agreement or a naming rights agreement, there's lots of issues that relate to fit and relationships, and things like morals clauses, where you basically say that if you do something terrible, I want to have the right to terminate, and vice versa. Things like non-disparagement clauses, so you don't leave a team or leave an organization and say terrible things about it. Those are the things that become very important when you are part of an ongoing organization. Now, in some of these sale deals, the existing owners stay on and they still have an interest in that, so then you get some of those issues. But so really, it's the money provisions, it's the decision-making, and things like that. A funny thing about the decision-making part of a deal, I have a client, they bought a team, and they agreed that the decision-making could stay with other people. And I remember me, the sports fan, I'm going, I don't get that. If I was going to be writing this major check, I want to make the decisions. Why am I buying a professional hockey team or a professional basketball team? Because I want to be that guy. Even if I'm that stupid guy, I still want to be that guy making those decisions. But some people just want to have that shiny toy and have someone else run it. And you look all across the world of sports and you see the difference. I'll give an example because this isn't a bad thing. Steve Ballmer wants to be involved, okay? He owns the Los Angeles Clippers. He paid a lot of money, although he still had a little money left. So he wants to be involved in those decisions. Joe Lacob at Warriors also wants to be involved in those decisions. Other owners are just very happy to put together an organization and let them work through it and come up with a good team and all that other stuff, and and by the way, get some appreciation. So it kind of all depends. Little circular answer, but bottom line, money, decision making, those are the two key issues I deal with.
Great. There's always a bit of a danger in asking you to predict the future, but I'm gonna right now. So if we fast forward about 5 to 10 years, let's say 10 years, what will look different about the business of sports in both the college and professional world, in your educated opinion?
You want to start?
If you haven't read it, there's a really neat, I don't know, called neat, disturbing, good piece that the Louisville president and athletic director just put out with some grave concerns about the sustainability of our model. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of us are quite concerned about, just whether it's from a financial standpoint or without the antitrust protections, the NCAA really isn't in a position to make rules and then be able to enforce them. So my hope is that in the next 10 years, we actually have a structure that allows us to have rules and thus parity, competitive, a little bit of a competitive parity, essentially. So that's my hope. I think one of the things that's being discussed right now, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this, is there's a sense that, college football is leaving a lot of money on the table. And the NFL, under the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961, is able to pool their media rights and sell them. We in college sports don't have the ability to do that. We're selling them conference by conference. And are we leaving money on the table? Should we be asking to change the Sports Broadcasting Act to be able to include college sports? And ultimately, would that be some version of solution to some of our revenue challenges? And so I'm curious to see kind of how that unfolds in the long run. And again, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that as well.
Well, I would say everybody loves the concept of bundling. Get everybody together. But it's like in life. When you get a group of people together, there's a few people in that group who end up being on the short end of the stick. And in college sports, to me, there's so many different types of organizations. So if you're all bundled together, Michigan is going to need to know that they're going to be getting a disproportionate share, because in their view, they're creating a disproportionate amount of value. And a lot of the teams in the SEC are going to feel that way. And so I think when you do a bundled situation, you do have great market power, and you could get much more. But then when they start slicing up the pie and you put your hand up, they sit there and say, well, I think it's terrific that you had all those Olympic athletes, and I think and by the way, I think it is amazing. The one thing when you walk around Cal is you see, number one, all of those Olympians, and number two, all of those Nobel Peace Prize parking spots. Yep. Nobody else has that. I walk by and I'm looking and going, wow, I can't believe that. They certainly didn't have it at Georgetown when I went to Georgetown. But so I do feel like you're going to have a real problem when it's hard to treat all of these universities, all of these sports programs holistically. And then what's going to happen, I fear if you do that, it's going to come down to a division of the money. And when it comes down to a division of the money, there's going to be a lot of people. You might say, well, rising tides, but I'm just afraid that you're going to find a lot of these schools who say, hey, we're here because of my football team, my basketball team. We're here because the amount of money I raise. Nobody cares if Ackawanna State was in this group. So why am I giving them some of my money? So it's going to be a little bit of a problem to me, but I do think it's heading towards that. Aggregation is clearly where we're coming to. That it's already happening. I used to kid with people. So we got a conference called the Big Ten. Does it have 10 teams? No. We got Big 12. Does it have 12 teams? They're just going to have to start calling the conference big. Or big blank or something like that. Because, that's what it used to be, 10 teams getting together in an enterprise. And I remember there was one time where the Big 12 had 10 and the Big 10 had like 14. And I'm thinking, change your name, okay? It doesn't even make sense. But so that's my answer to that question. As far as the crystal ball, so the crystal ball to me, I have three large buckets that I think are going to be the greatest changes when when 10 years from now, we say what's going on. The first one, number one, I really believe in sports, college athlete compensation. We're not done yet. It's going to be changing. It's going to make a big difference. I was telling people what I would love to have happen as an old-time sports fan, maybe with all of this money, maybe when my basketball team, when the Bears or the Bruins have a really good freshman class, maybe I'll be able to see them in their sophomore year. Maybe even, because it used to be with Georgetown, we got Patrick Ewing, and then we get this piece and that piece, and you watch them gel. Now it's, okay, you've got 7 months to win, and then we're going to start all over. And if you're Duke, it's okay, because every year you get the 27 best athletes in the world, so that's fine. But so that's going to change things. But so that's my number one bucket, the compensation. Ultimately, even though I don't think I like that, I just feel like we're going to see an employment situation. It's going to head towards that. I hope not, but in the end, you're going to have employment compensation and benefits and things like that, and that's going to be a bit of a mess. But I think ultimately that's where they're going to get there, because NIL is such an uneven remedy. The people who get it, we all know, the funny thing is, when you talk about NIL, and I think you tell me if you agree with this, you'd like to think it's the best players, but it's really the people with the most impressions. I did a NIL deal for women's volleyball in Hawaii. A bank was doing a big NIL deal, and I will tell you, in Hawaii, volleyball is what football is in Michigan. And this woman had the greatest contacts you have ever seen, and she got an incredible amount of money. Why? Because the reason why the bank was paying her that money was they wanted to spread their name. And this woman, if she sent out one Instagram, the entire world saw it. So I don't think that that's a long-term solution, because not everybody has the same contact lists and not everybody plays as well, and I don't trust the system to make sure that everybody gets taken care of. So the first one was college athlete compensation. The second one is in sports. I'll roughly call it venue experience, okay? In the old days, I do a lot of this old day stuff. It must mean I'm getting old. In the old days, you go to a stadium, you go to an arena to watch a game, and that was the greatest thing on earth. Now you have to encourage people that if they come to the game, it's going to be almost as good as them sitting at home, watching it on their phone, watching it on their TV, and be able to watch 2 or 3 games. I do get the feeling, and my son is with the San Francisco Giants. He's a big sports fan, but I do get the feeling if you told him he can go to a game, but he can't bring his phone, he'd say, I'm good. It's okay. I'll watch it on the phone. So they're trying very hard to change that venue experience, and that's all the stadium deals I do. They have grazing areas where you don't even sit in your seats. They're trying to make it more interactive, and they're trying to address the fact that people sometimes consume sports nowadays by not watching. It drives me crazy, but that's the world. And then the third bucket, which is going to be a game changer, and it already is global expansion. It's already happening, and it's going to happen more. The NFL's playing in Mexico. They're playing in England. NBA's doing this. They tried some stuff in China. That didn't work so well, but they'll be back. And soccer is like that. They're all like that. And that's going to be a game changer, because now you have an entire international we already have a lot of international players in the sports teams now, but there's going to be franchises everywhere. There's going to be leagues everywhere. We already know it, and I'm a big MLS guy. I represent about 8 teams in the MLS, and I like MLS. But I have my soccer friends who say, oh, well, I love soccer. That's why I watch Premier Football on Saturday morning, on cable, by the way, but they watch it. So to me, those are the 3 big game changers. In 10 years from now, I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's not going to look like this.
All right, well, you heard it here first. We have time for Q&A, so we have a person who's going to come and hand out the mic. We ask you to please just use the mic, but who would like to ask some questions of the panelists?
So this question a little more for Jenny. I'm just kind of curious how far and how creative we can get with these kinds of distribution structures and frameworks of membership in the conferences. This kind of came from what you said about Cal having, the 1/3 distribution, which I think grows to 100% over the next decade or so. Maybe I was just young at the time, but I come from Big Ten country, traditional Big Ten country, early 2010s. We were just adding Nebraska, adding Rutgers, Maryland. It seemed kind of simple. You're a member. You're either in, you're out. It's not kind of like half in, half out. You're a member, but not fully yet. But now it just seems like so many different things going on, escalating structures. You've got Sacramento State paying like $20 million to join the Mid-American Conference to play the directional schools in Michigan. At what point does it get like so creative that like schools are building a portfolio of conferences that they're getting like part-time interest in? Like if you're Colorado, like, oh, okay, I want to own a slice of this new like Pac-12 thing going on, but I also want some like Big 12 in my portfolio.
It's a great question, and there's lots of pieces of that answer. First off, it's probably important to note that our core conference is the ACC, but only 24 of our sports compete in the ACC because they don't sponsor all of our sports. So we have another 6 sports or 5 sports that are in the Mountain Pacific Sports Federation, and then rugby is in a separate conference as well. So there's a couple things that come to mind, and we didn't actually get to it earlier, but I think there's a vision that there may end up being a super league, and that may just be a football-specific thing, or football and basketball, or it may end up being all sports. So you may see even fewer kind of power conferences at a certain point. But in terms of the creative strategies, one of the things that's interesting that it made me think of when you were talking about kind of pooling media rights is that in the ACC, we just this year started this kind of tiered media distribution structure based on viewership, which we don't need to be a part of that for the next 7 years, which is good because I don't want our 1/3 to be tiered even more. But it's interesting to be able to, for the Michigans of the world, or in our case, probably the Miamis and the Clemsons of the world, for them to get, more money essentially because they're bringing in more viewers, but yet you're still full members of the conferences. I think we're going to continue to see shuffling happening. We had the power level conference realignment a couple of years ago, and now it's all happening at the mid-major level. I think when the Big Ten media contract comes up in a couple of years, you'll probably see some shuffling that happens again. So this is kind of a new world that we live in. I think having a core conference, in my mind, is still pretty critical. I think there's a lot of, having all of your sports in one place and knowing that you have a guaranteed source of revenue from a television contract is really critical in terms of the work that we do. I also think, we were talking earlier about rivalries, right? There is something important about having historic rivalries, and there's also something important around having really great matchups every weekend too. So that may be more of a super league concept. Who knows? But there's a lot of moving parts for sure.
Thank you so much. We are out of time now, but no, there's really great responses. Hopefully maybe during lunch, if people see you, you can ask your questions directly then. But we're going to move on to, can we get a round of applause for the first panel? And now we're going to bring up panel 2.